Hello and good evening, everyone. I want to go ahead and welcome you to tonight's webinar, which is Best Practices for Digital Workflow Record Taking in Full Arch Rehabilitation. This lecture will be presented to you by Jeff Carlson, CDT. And now I would like to introduce tonight's guest lecturer, Jeff Carlson, CDT. Jeff has more than 40 years of dental experience with almost 30 years of focused on dental implants. Jeff is the primary author of a 300-page fully illustrated cookbook created for restorative dentists, and he is the co-author of the corresponding auxiliary manual. Jeff co-developed a restorative-based training program that more than 9,000 dental professionals have attended nationally and internationally. As the senior implant specialist for NDX and Sequence, Jeff provides technical chairside support and lecture across the country on immediate loading, full arch restoration, and sequence guided prosthetics, and the latest advancements for in-implant technology. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you conduct this webinar tonight. It is all yours.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I do appreciate that nice introduction, just as I wrote it. Hello, everyone. Last one of the year. We're all getting into the holiday spirit, I hope. And thank you so much, seriously, for taking time this evening for this presentation. We're going to really get what we can, the best I can do in an hour's time frame. We're going to talk about the pre-surgical records, what's needed, and this is a digital workflow. So this is going to be for those of you that keep asking about, I want it all digital workflow. Well, this is it. So we're going to talk about what do you need to do pre-surgically to make things happen for you smoothly. And then the day of surgery, what are the records that you need to do on the day of surgery? And then also what records for the fabrication of the definitive prosthesis. So let's just dive right into this puppy. Oh, I have to do my disclosures. I am a full-time employee of NDX, and so I will be getting paid for this time and a half. Commercial support disclosure is that I am supported by National Dentex Laboratories, and I have no travel expense. I'm sitting in my home in frozen tundra of Minneapolis. So, my friends, we have decisions, and decisions to make when it comes to this. When it comes to surgery, we have decisions about are we going to do free-handed, guided, fully guided? Are you going to use photogrammetry? Are it going to be fully guided, what we refer to as a modified alternative? Are you going to use precision iOS technology? When it comes to restorative, we have also decisions. Are you going to do an analog or conventional protocol? You're going to do a fully guided restorative protocol utilizing precision iOS for your restorative protocol. So these are the decisions going into this. And I can tell you the best thing for you to do before you commit too far with a case is talk to your laboratory. Just make sure you all are on the same page. What I've learned from doing this, really getting involved in the digital world last couple of years, the level of communication with full arch implant dentistry is another level from just doing crown and bridge implants, overdenture implants. But now we get into the digital because it gets pretty specific with some of the technologies that you would maybe have in your office, what the laboratories have, the softwares, how current you are with some of your scanning units, et cetera. Do you have all the updates and things like that? The laboratories that are doing this can really help you so that you don't have any surprises along the way, because we know surprises are usually not good when it comes to implant dentistry, especially this level of dentistry. So let's look at our surgery options about whether free-handed, fully guided. We're focusing tonight is going to be on the guided approach, a digital approach, whether it's free-handed or guided, I should say. Uh, a lot of things to think about. How do you choose? It's not so straightforward. It sometimes can be almost overwhelming. But I would say that you have to look at your surgical experience, even the patient's um, um, physiology. What are you looking at? What are you going to be approached with? Are you going to utilize photogrammetry? Um, what laboratory you have for their support. What's the time frame for the from the start to patient's expectation of it being delivered with a final prosthesis? How many appointments are you going to be using iOS? And then, very importantly, just the cost. And none of these should be a surprise for you on the day of surgery, because if you talk to the laboratories ahead of time, all this can be answered for you and be laid out for you very nicely. Let's talk about photogrammetry. This is something that I think I find kind of interesting. It's a lot of buzzword about it, a lot of talking about it, but I think there's really sometimes a misunderstanding of what photogrammetry is providing you as a clinician and a laboratory. Um, you're going to see an acronym of just PG, for photogrammetry, just like iOS for intraoral scan. But what photogrammetry is, it's really they're special scanning units used in photography, sometimes laser lights that, in conjunction with specific types of scanning bodies or scanning indicators, what photogrammetry does do, and it's proven out, it is the most accurate way to obtain the implant position to the other implants within the arch. That would also include the multi-unit abutment, because what we're really doing with all these scans is we're actually attaching a multi-unit abutment onto the implant. Then on top of the multi-unit abutment, as you'll see in our slides coming up, that's where you put these scanning indicators are actually attaching to the top of the multi-unit abutment, also referred to as the MUA. Now, photogrammetry is given within some of the articles I just read recently, like 5 to 10 microns of accuracy with this technology, which is fantastic. But here's where a lot of people don't, I think, catch the point that photogrammetry, it does not capture or record the required data of the working arch, the dentition of the or the tissue of the working arch, I should say, and the opposing arch doesn't capture that, doesn't capture a bite. So you can't just use photogrammetry without using iOS technology, because the laboratory is going to have the information of the working arch, the dentition of the working arch, the tissues of the working arch, and again, the opposing arch itself, as well as a bite registration. So that's going to be captured with iOS technology. So just kind of let you at a glance here. These are just some examples of probably the more common, if you will, photogrammetry scanning units. iMetric, the iCam 4D, and all these are really nice systems. They all work exceptionally well. It's just a matter of for you. It's a matter of preference of cost, support. I think it's very important to find out what kind of support you're going to have with this, because as with all new technologies, you have a learning curve with it, be it you, the clinician, as well as your team members. But PIC system probably been around. I believe that I can say that that's one of the first original ones, at least from my exposure. It's the first one that I was exposed to maybe 6 years ago or so. Um, and then the Micron mapper. And all three of these do a really wonderful job. So it's just your preference on that. So on the day of surgery, what you're going to do, again, the surgery can be free-handed or you can do guided surgery. The image on the right is showing there is the one of the in sequence bone foundation guides in place. But those are the scan bodies or scan indicators for that particular camera that I'm showing here is a Micron mapper. And so what takes place, very basic, fundamentally what's taking place with the photogrammetry unit is that the camera is capturing through the GPS, if you will, from the markers on the scan bodies. And so what you see, the right image, the lower left of that image, that is like a live interpretation of what. So as you move the camera, that actually is moving on your laptop, which is right next to the patient in the operatory. The top right, that is the digital representation of what was captured. Some systems will give you green light, some When you're ready to go, they go from red to green as you're moving around. And I'm not here to teach you how to use the units. I just want to share with you the technology that's available. So again, when it comes to the photogrammetry, it's a lot of people want to get involved with it. And some people think that this is it, pull back the curtains, we've got photogrammetry going and we're off. We're ready to take care of our patients in a digital workflow. However, sometimes, as I mentioned already, with photogrammetry, we're not quite there yet. Okay, we're still missing some key components here, and really, what that is going to be is the key components are going to be the merging of the digital technologies, which is photogrammetry and iOS. And you're going to hear the phrase about precision iOS. And I'm going to explain to you what we mean by that. So just keep in mind that when you're looking for a full digital workflow and you're from surgery all the way through, that it is two technologies together. I am going to talk about too that there is some technology out there. This is changing yearly, sometimes even, I want to say monthly. It's not like that, but there are some units now that are coming out that are combination units where it has a photogrammetry. It captures a photogrammetry perspective as well as iOS in one unit. So again, it's exciting what's happening. Um, so let's talk about what we're referring to as precision iOS. And the reason I'm using the phrase precision iOS is because their scan bodies, the scanning flags, uh, whatever terminology that you want to utilize, um, they are specific to full arch. You cannot use yours if you're doing crown and bridge scanning with your iOS units and you have your scan bodies. You cannot use those scan bodies for a full arch scan. They just don't have enough geometry on them when you're scanning a full arch for the software to stitch the data together. So just know you are going to have to, we're going to talk about that, you are going to have to purchase um, a precision scanning system. And I'll cover a few of those with you here in just a couple of minutes. Um, so again, with your iOS, you're going to be capturing the position of the multi-unit abutments um, by using these scan bodies, these precision scan bodies. And this is required because you're going to have to do this to be able to capture the working arch, the posing dentition, soft tissues and the bite, etc. You're going to see if some terminology, whether you're referring to some things on our website, in some of my presentation, that you'll notice it went from from precision iOS to simply iOS. This is just a trademark phrase that NDX has using this terminology, but it's referring to utilizing these precision scanning indicators for doing full arch scanning, be it day of surgery or when we get in more into the restorative steps, which we're going to cover that as well. So I just want you not to get confused. It's the same whether you see something or if I say precision iOS or simply iOS, it's the same. Again, it's just kind of NDX's terminology. So let's look at some of what I like to say more of the common, more being added to the market. But these are three that we've worked with, have really, really good success with. I think that I encourage you just to, investigate them and find out for yourself which one meets your expectations. And so we're going to go through just a couple of them here. But again, the concept is similar. There's just some little different geometry of the units, the systems, I should say, and then the way they approach it might be a little bit different. So it's not like 180 difference, but there's some quite a few similarities, quite frankly. Now, we're also seeing where there's been an interest, if you will, to go to what for lack of a better term, I'm calling it fully guided, the surgery, fully guided, but a modified alternative to fully guided. For those of you that have been using in sequence the fully guided prosthetic approach, the full system with the provisionals, all the guides, the parts have already been customized for you, etc. We do offer something that we call a Simply Guide Plus, and I'm just going to share that real quickly with you. But this is something that we're seeing where it does help to reduce the cost on this, and the key to it, it gives what most clinicians still don't want to give up, and that's going to be guided alveolar bone reduction. So your guided alveoloplasty. Bone reduction is so critical with these type of cases, as well as the guided implant placement. So those are two things that, yes, some people say I can do it just as well free-handed, and many of you clinicians can do that, and more power to you for that. But some of these cases that we're treatment planning, there is no room for error. I mean, we are splitting hairs just about fitting implants into really minimal spaces, really avoiding very key and critical vital anatomy. So the guided implant and guided bone reductions are something still that many clinicians prefer to have that. So real quickly, what that is you're going to have guided surgery, what you're going to have the bone foundation guide. So you're going to get your bone reduction guided, you're going to get your implant placement guided. And really what that is going to take you to is what you see the clinical photo here, where you'll have the multi-unit abutments will be placed onto the implants. And from there, you for your provisional, or maybe you're wanting to go to a definitive prosthesis, but you can follow, you use your photogrammetry or simply iOS, or you can even do your conventional protocols. So again, the Simple Guide Plus is a way just to give you, where you still get a plan. So we're evaluating the bone quality, et cetera, things like that. So that's something that you can talk to your NDX rep more about that. So there's another decision that needs to be made ahead of time, and that is how, when, and who is going to deliver the provisional. So we're seeing where a lot of clinicians want to have a provisional the day of surgery for the patient, so they leave with teeth. But we're seeing a change in that. We're seeing where a lot of clinicians, I'm going to share a lot of different things with you this evening. What we're seeing is that the other option is to get a provisional the next day after surgery, so the day after surgery. And that's been very well received by patients because when they're done with their procedure, and if they leave the clinical practice, or I should say the implanting clinician, with healing abutments on top of MUAs, they're pretty much just going home and going to bed. They're not going out anywhere. And you can have the provisional probably by 10:30 to 10 a.m. the next morning, and very simple procedure. We'll cover that coming up. So, but you just need to make sure who's going to deliver it. When's it going to happen? Is it going to be the day of surgery you want the provisional? Is it the day after? Is it 2 days after? So we're going to talk about those different options as well. Now, for records that are pre-surgical records, so you're going to need, if you want to have a provisional um, delivered the day of surgery or the day after, pre-surgical records are needed. So be aware of this because this is very important. Again, talk to your laboratories ahead of time. They'll give you the timelines on what's needed for this. So I want to just hit some high points for you that of things to be thinking about. So one that's very important is, this is pre-surgical. Um, do you need to have a new smile created? In other words, does a patient have an existing denture and they're happy with that? They're just with the aesthetics of it and the phonetics of it. They just don't like the denture coming in and out. They want something that's fixed, if you will. Or do they have, broken down terminal dentition? We need to recreate a smile line, the aesthetics. There's much more. In other words, you need a smile created. And that needs to be done ahead of time. And so the particular records will be needed for that. Um, the other thing to think about is the patient's vertical dimension of occlusion. Are you happy with where they're at? Many of these patients that are accepting this treatment and need this treatment, I should say, have a closed or collapsed vertical because of the broken down dentition, because of bone loss, et cetera. So many times you're going to need to open that patient's vertical. And if you're opening a patient's vertical, more than my training over the years has been that if you're doing more than about a 3 millimeter, 2 to 3 millimeter of opening of the vertical, you need to, go into some splint therapy for probably a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks to deprogram the musculature and reprogram the musculature to that new desired vertical. You don't want to necessarily do this on the day of surgery with a provisional where the patient all of a sudden has this new vertical and their muscles have used to a particular functional vertical dimension of occlusion. And now, because they've lost a lot of proprioception, because you've edentulated the patient, and they really can put a lot of force onto these freshly placed implants. So this is something that I think I see, unfortunately, too many times clinicians miss addressing the patient's vertical and doing some splint therapy ahead of time. So, the thing that happens is the patients, once they say, maybe they've been thinking about this accepting a treatment for 6 months or a year or quite a while. But once they say yes, you know what happens, don't you? They can't get it done soon enough. All of a sudden they have a wedding. It's the holidays. It's a vacation. So I just want to share that with you. Spend a little extra time on that because it's something that does happen quite often that gets missed is that checking out the vertical. Then the other thing is communicating with your laboratory. Make sure we're seeing a big difference in the quality of the of iOS scanners. Um, the generations, some of them that we're into six, generations 5 and 6 with some of the different manufacturers out there, and we're getting some really nice results. What we are seeing, though, unfortunately, is some of the older versions are not performing real well. And it's taking a lot of time to get the scans. The quality's not there. And a lot of times the clinicians are not real happy with the results. So I would suggest if you don't have a version that's maybe 2 years old or newer, that you reach out to the laboratory before you even get started with a case, talk to them about what system you have, and you can even do some demos on a model and work with the laboratory. Again, there's no reason for have surprises here, but you got to communicate with your laboratories ahead of time. So critical to do that. Um, and also, there's going to be something that's called reference screws or fiducial markers. We're going to talk more about that too. But you need to have those available and know what to do with them. Um, then this is really important. There's going to be a cutoff for your laboratory that they're going to need some of these preliminary scans, you know, probably 10 working days on the low end, maybe less than that. It just kind of depends on the lab. But it may be, 7 to 10, 5 to 10, 7 working days for the laboratory to be able to fabricate a provisional that can either be delivered for the day of surgery. I'm sorry, to deliver a design that you can print on the day of surgery or deliver a finished provisional for the day after surgery. And we're going to cover all that coming up. But just know that there's preliminary scans that need to be received, a week to 2 weeks prior to the surgery date. We do have a kind of a cheat sheet checklist, if you will, that's available of just kind of a bullet points of things to check out. And then again, you can do this freehand surgery. You don't have to have any type of guided surgery at all. Um, the thing about free-handed surgery, of course, you're going to have extra inventory of the implants and abutments. You don't know necessarily what cup height you're going to need, what angles for sure you're going to need. So just have the parts available. You don't want to compromise anything on the day of surgery. So just make sure you have plenty of inventory if you are going to go with a free-handed approach to this. So now let's think about a next day provisional fabricated by the lab or a same day design that's printed by the lab. It's in office printed. So it's printed by the clinician in your office. Once again, those scans I was referring to need to be received ahead of time. And so what are they? They're going to be, you have to have these scans. It's going to be the scan of the working arch, the opposing arch, and a scan of the bite. Now, if you don't have a smile that's acceptable on the working arch, then you're going to need to talk to the laboratory about a smile design and get something approved prior, a week or so prior to the surgery. These scans, what they're going to do with this information ahead of the time is they're going to design that smile. They're going to have things all laid out. So on the day of surgery, when you are placing the implants and you have your fiducial markers, you're doing your scans, and you submit them to the lab. We're going to talk all about this coming up. Then the laboratory in real time, they're going to start either A, doing a design for you and have it to you within 2 hours that you can print it in your office, print the provisional in your office, or they need that time to go ahead and do it at the laboratory where they're going to print, stain, and glaze, and then they'll ship it out that same day. So it'll be an overnighted to you, and you'll have it, or the restorative doctor will have it the next morning to deliver to the patient. The other thing to keep in mind here is, as we talked a little bit about the vertical, if you're changing the vertical, then we also want to get a scan, maybe with some type of a bite appliance, leaf gauge, something that you're utilizing to give the laboratory a closer rendition to the VDO that you're looking for, because this is going to help the laboratory with the spatial, if you will, the heights of the provisional, so that again, on the day of surgery, when they get the actual scans of the where the implants ended up and related to each other, that they're not going to have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, on the day of surgery. They need to expedite. This is going to happen fast and furious on the day of surgery to get you this data to meet your expectations and your patient's expectations. So this is that checklist that I was referred to just a few minutes ago that kind of gives you a step-by-step points and time frames of what you should be doing ahead of time. All right, so those were records prior to the day of surgery. So now we want to talk about what's going to happen on the day of surgery. So here we are, day of surgery. What's going to be required now to be able to provide you with either the design for you to print a provisional in office, or the laboratory to do it and have it delivered the next day. I will take a moment here before I forget and say this. Um, I talk to a lot of doctors and they think that they really like it sounds good, the idea of printing in office and doing it. My friends, really investigate that closely. I can tell you that, I've been to many of our labs, but one of our labs that's near or closer to where I'm at, um, when I go over there and I watch them, they do this. This is what they do every day. It still takes almost 2 hours for a very trained, experienced technician with all the right equipment to print, wash, stain, and glaze these provisionals. Uh, so doing it in your office, you're going to need someone that's going to know that's going to be able to do it. Often it's probably the best assistant, if not yourself. And your top assistant usually busy doing many other things. And I've heard from them that a lot of them are not real happy doing it. Some like doing it, and that's great. My only point here is I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I want you just to think about things, because some people try to make it sound like oh, it's going to be great. You save the money. But I got to tell you, so many times people will buy these units and then they'll try it and it just sits on the shelf and collects dust. Um, Now, printing your own surgical guides, 1, 2, 3 guides, something like that in your office, is different. But when you're trying to do a provisional, because again, these patients have pretty high expectations for the money that they're paying for this, to have a nice looking smile. Just wanted to share that with you. My 2 cents worth. All right, so on the day of surgery, what we're looking at for the scans, we need to record the position of the implants, the MUAs, the working arch proposed uh, in a proposed prosthesis. So we need the bite. We need all this information. So how are we going to get that information? So these precision scan systems, and these are 3 of them that we work with these very routinely. And again, there's others out there. Um, but the truss system on the left, the OptiSplint system in the middle, and the implant direct scan on the right. And again, they all work very nicely. So let's take a look at what is going to be the protocol on the day of surgery. So, all right, we talked about what you're going to do. Let's actually go in and do it. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to place your fiducial markers, or also we call these reference screws. Um, they these on the left are from Digital Arches off the Splint folks. Very nice. They have the geometry on them. I'll show you the next slide what else goes with some of these systems. But what you see here is there's you have to use at least two. We like to suggest that you put three of these reference or fiducial markers in place. It's not mandatory. The more information you give the lab, it's going to be in your best interest. We can be more accurate. So I'm going to show you that there's 6 scans that we're going to need. And you start trying to save time and not do some of the scans. Oh, I don't think I need that. Um, Please just follow the protocols, and I can assure you, you're going to get the things you're looking for. And then maybe as you get more experience with it, you might find ways to maybe save a scan or two. But in the beginning, just please follow the protocol because this is what we've been doing. We do it every day, and we know that this works. So what you're seeing here on the right, we have the two fiduciary markers. This is a mandibular arch. Obviously, these will typically go in the retromolar pad area. The third one is somewhere out onto the buccal. Of course, this would need to be placed below any surgical area, whether it's your flap, of course, bone reduction, surgical guides, etc. Again, it's not mandatory, but we do recommend that. So with these systems, these fiducial marker systems, and the one I'm showing, this is the system here from OptiSplint. I'm sorry, from Digital Arches. But they got it's a nice system, the pilot drill with it. They have the adapter. It's like a female hex on the end of it that will fit on top of the hex that you see on the reference screw. And that's how you can drive that into place. So you seat your 2 to 3 reference screws in the maxillary arch. You're going to put them in the palate. You want to spread them out, 5 to 10 millimeters apart from each other, somewhere around the median suture line. And what you want to do is you don't want them too close to each other because you want to be able for your scanner to be able to pick up the anatomy or the geometry on the distal, if you will, that anterior one, and the mesial of the posterior one, and the distal of the posterior one, etc. So you space those out, but you want to scan. So this is your first scan. Your first scan, all you're doing at this stage is numbing the patient up, placing your fiducial markers, and you're taking a scan, capturing all the teeth, as much anatomy as you can, and then know that you do not remove these reference markers. You cannot tighten them back up. So make sure that they're firm when you seat them, because this is a reference point the laboratory is always going to be going back to when they're aligning the scans in the software. So this is your first scan, is going to be this. Then another scan will be to scan the opposing arch and scan the bite. Now, this is day of surgery. So if you did do the scan a week to 2 weeks prior to have a provisional made the day after, you don't need to do these 2 scans, okay? Because the lab already has them. They have the opposing arch and they have the bite. The only reason that you would scan again on the day of surgery is if something happened. If the opposing arch changed, something happened. Maybe you did some occlusal adjustments, or I don't know what the scenario might be. But scan if you want, but you don't need to if you've already scanned them ahead of time. So now that you've made these scans, then you can go ahead and reflect the tissue using your protocol for doing your surgery. Now, again, you can either do freehanded or use guided, but you're going to go ahead and do the surgical placement of the implants and place the multi-unit abutments. Okay. So what we're picking up next now on the next slide is going to be implants are placed. The multi-unit abutments are in place. They're in the correct rotational position. You verified all your angulation. If you're doing it free-handed, if you're using a guided system, you verified that your timing is all lined up on your angled abutments, etc. So now we're going to go ahead and start using the actual, truly the precision scanning to capture this data for the laboratory. So the first one I'm just going to kind of run through quickly. So on the top here will be the truss. It's packaged nicely in a box. Everything's labeled. Here, what you see are their scan jigs, is what their terminology is. They'll be seated on top of the multi-unit abutments, and then you'll scan those. Then they get luted together, and then that's not done yet. Now I'm gonna jump to the OptaSplint. So with the OptaSplint, this is from the Digital Arch company. And here you see pretty similar, but their scan bodies are a little different looking. The same concept. There's certain geometry there that's going to be captured. They utilize something called a hexagonal bridge frame, and these are easily to modify. They come in two different sizes, and then those will be connected to the scan bodies. So what we're doing is it's kind of like you're getting a verification jig when you're doing these systems. Again, accuracy is so critical here. So now let's continue on now with trust. So now that you've done your scan, you've luted it, you take it out of the mouth, you're going to reinforce it on the integular side here. With that system, it's going to come with multi-unit analogs, multi-unit abutment analogs, and you'll screw those to the scan jigs. And then it's kind of neat. They have a little denture box and a Ziploc baggie, a pre-measured of lab stone. And then you'll just mix up some stone and you actually pour a master cast into that little denture box, set it in there. When it sets up, you can box it up and send that to the laboratory. With OptaSplint, once you've luted the hexagonal frame bridge to the scan bodies, then you can remove that. And again, you can reinforce that, add more material to it. Now, their step would be to take that luted frame and set it onto what they call as a scanning plate. And then you would do a scan of that, and you can send that to the laboratory. It's still nice to send the laboratory the framework. Just be sure and package everything really well. If you're doing things where you're trying to do things like same day or different things, I don't want to there's different scenarios that you can get into. Then you don't necessarily need to send these materials into the lab, but it's good to have these master casts for that or for verification when it comes to the fit. It can be checked out by the laboratory. Okay, so now you've done your scans with your precision scanning system. Now what you're going to do is you're going to remove those, and now you're going to suture the tissues. We're going to seat your multi-unit healing caps, then suture around that. While you're doing this, you scanned using the precision scan bodies without it sutured. It's just easy to make sure that they're seated pardon me, that they're completely seated. You can lay the tissue up into there. But what we're doing with that precision scan bodies is we're just getting the geometry, that precise geometry on the scan bodies themselves. We're not trying to capture any tissue on that. You're capturing tissue, but that's coming in this scan here coming up. So what you're going to do is you remove those precision scan bodies. You're going to seat the healing caps onto the multi-unit abutments. You're going to suture nicely around that, each one of those caps. Then after suturing, then you're going to remove the healing cap and you're going to do an iOS scan, and you want to capture as much of the tissue as possible. And also don't forget to capture your fiducial markers here on the posteriors. You see them. They must be in the scan. So capture that, get a good capture of the tops of the multi-unit abutments, capturing the tissue. So these are things that the laboratory is going to be able to utilize to help align reference points to align these scans up in the software. Okay, so now we've got your scans. Again, we're on the day of surgery. So now at this point, you can dismiss the patient. Then you're going to upload the scans to the laboratory. And again, I think this uploading to the laboratory, you need to have your conversation with the laboratory ahead of time. As I mentioned before, about making sure even your scanning unit is working well, gives you the quality that you need, but it's to make sure that your software, you're communicating with your software is communicating with the laboratory software. You work this out not on the day of surgery where the patient's sitting there and you're on the phone with the lab trying to figure out how come you can't upload your scans. So you're going to upload your scan of the pre-arch, sorry, pre-surgical scan with the fiducial markers, the precision scan bodies in place, the scan of the tops of the exposed MUAs, including the reference screws, the opposing arch, the bite. Again, the opposing arch and bite are only necessary if you didn't do them before. And then complete the electronic RX and send all those goodies to the laboratory. So for a next day printed provisional, that's going to be received the next day as long as you submitted those scans I just showed you on the previous slide to the lab's cutoff time. Now, you need to talk to the laboratory ahead of time. It might be based on your time zone versus their time zone. It might be that their cutoff time might be noon Central Time. So if you're on Eastern Time, you got to make sure you're aware of that. But you're going to need to send those scans to the laboratory by their cutoff time. When you meet that criteria, then let's say that if you're going to have it printed, where it's going to be delivered the next day, then the lab has that afternoon to finish the design, merge all the files, print it, wash it, clean it, stain and glaze it, get it off the FedEx, and then it'll be received the next morning. So it's important also to know what's the first delivery time, whether it's FedEx. Most of the labs our labs are using FedEx, but based on your zip code, you may not be on a 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. delivery zone, or maybe it's an 8:30. You know what I'm saying? Just know what times are. Again, communicate to your laboratory. So then the laboratory, the next day, you would get a finished, really nice looking provisional. There's no metal copings in it. You'll have what these like referred to as like a Powerball screw or a desk screw that will come with it. And very nice that it's easy to do the next day. Just remove the healing caps and can screw the provisional on. And I got to tell you, boy, these almost always come out. The occlusion is just spot on. And for our specialist friends, what's really nice about this is that you don't have to do any prosthetic or restorative steps, if you will, on the day of surgery. The general dentist, restorative doctor, doesn't need to come and do any pickups on the day of surgery. You can just do your surgery, put your, suture, do your scans, and patient leaves with the healing abutments in, and the restorative doctor delivers a provisional the next day. Um, if you're not, if you don't meet that cutoff time for whatever reason, and things happen, the lab's going to do everything it can to meet your needs and your patient's needs. Know that. But sometimes, maybe your surgery runs really long. There was challenges. Then you would get the provisional, if not the next day, then the second business day, you would get the provisional. So things happen, but prepare your patient for that as well, because sometimes, surgeries go a lot longer than you planned. Now, for an in-office printing of the provisional, then the design for the laboratory to do the design for you, again, there's a cutoff time, but our laboratories are working on a maximum of a 2-hour time frame. Someone might get it to you sooner. Again, talk to your laboratory. Again, based upon, we're getting into the holiday season here, so sometimes we have vacations and things like that. So it's important to talk to the lab ahead of time to know what is the turnaround time on that, so that if you're done at 11, you send the scans to the lab, that hopefully by 1 o'clock your time, then that you get the scans. And what you're seeing here, these are the actual This is what you when you open up the file that the lab sends you, your STL file, that's what you're going to see. That's the scan. Then you're going to send that to your printer, and then you've got your time frame to print, clean, stain, and glaze, and deliver your provisional to the patient. Okay? Hopefully that's all making sense so far. So now we're going to implants have integrated. Now we're at the restorative phase. So now we're going to talk about fabrication, the steps for the definitive prosthesis. So time has passed, and let's see what we're going to do now on the to begin the restorative phase. So here again, what we're going to do is we do recommend, NDX does recommend that your second appointment that you go for a resin prototype try-in before you go to the definitive. However, it is your choice. If you want to, if you're real happy with it, patient's happy, you have nice tissue adaptation of the provisional, it's your choice. You could go to the final restoration, but I would strongly recommend that, especially if you have a patient that's very particular or you've had challenges working the occlusion, you're working all the eccentric, excursive movements out, the occlusion, to go ahead and do a resin prototype. It just takes away, make sure to minimize or try to eliminate variables, but you really can't ever eliminate variables, but to minimize the variables, um, and to do that. The good news is, unless you really want to have fun, you can always go back and finish it off with the analog or conventional um, protocols. But I don't think we want to do that. So let's take a look now that we're going to do. This is for a resin prototype. So this is going to be your first restorative appointment. Our mindset is, yep, okay, first appointment. We're going to get the information for the laboratory to be able to fabricate a resin prototype try-in. So what's the laboratory going to need? So one thing that we like to see is photos. They've been wearing the provisional now for several months. So give us a set of photos. We really like to see that. Also, it helps us to make sure that, when the designs that we're matching what you see there. Then we have 6 scans that are required for you to do uh, to get to whether you're going to the final or going to a resin prototype. So typically the good thing to do, the first scan would be to scan the existing provisional in the mouth. So you scan, capturing, the entire bridge. Really like to see you get at least 5 millimeters of the tissue beyond the transition line. Make sure you get the transition line for sure. You've got to capture the transition line, but also get, at least 5 millimeters below that. We want to make sure that when we get to the final, that we're getting a nice adaptation of the provisional or the final to that area. So then the next scan would be scan the opposing and scan the bite. Now you do need to do this. Okay, the day of surgery, these were optional because you're only talking about a week to 2 weeks difference. But now we're talking about several months. Things could have changed. So you really need to go ahead and take a new scan of the opposing and scan the bite. And just a little note for you, sometimes, again, based on your system, um, you may need to go into a denture mode or actually turn off the AI feature. Because what'll frustrate you is when you're scanning, sometimes you go, okay, good, and then you hit enter, and then it does its segmenting. That's the wrong word, sorry. Can't think of it right now. But all of a sudden it comes back and you lose the data and you rescan again. So this is something why I think it's good to do a demo with your laboratory on just a model of any type, patient demonstration models, patient sample models that you have to scan and send that to lab and do this ahead of time. Then you're going to remove the provisional and scan the tops of the multi-unit abutments, scan the tissue. Again, get as much data as you possibly can. And then out of the mouth, you're going to do a 360-degree scan of the provisional out of the mouth. Um, and going to take that information. We've got that. Now the last scan is going to be using pretty much, similar to what you did on the day of surgery, whether you were there or not, I don't know. But you're going to use the same systems, whether you had the truss or, if you use truss on the day of, you don't need to use, you could use something else on for the final. So just they're not connected to the day of surgery. They're just whatever you have, but you need to have a system to do this. So again, you're just going to, follow the same protocols that you saw earlier. Then you're going to upload all this information to the laboratory. And so here's your 6 scans you're going to send to the laboratory. Then the laboratory and also the prescription for sure. You always want to give a new prescription, let them know if there's any changes um, on anything. And then if you did any pick up anything, just make sure you send all the screws, all the components to the laboratory. Okay, so now the laboratory has fabricated the resin prototype. So you're going to go ahead and do a try-in with the resin prototype. So we're going to remove the patient's provisional. Then you're going to seat the resin prototype. Now you'll see here in parentheses about using we said about use one screw to seat it first. That's the Sheffield test. If you're not familiar with it, just go to YouTube and or Google, whatever you want to do. Type in Sheffield test. It's a great way of finding out to make sure that you don't have that you do have a passive fit of your prosthesis. Once you've done that, then place the remaining screws and then, check your occlusion, take photos. It's optional if there's minor changes. If there's a lot, it's probably a nice idea to do that. Scan the bite. If you had occlusal adjustments, make sure anything you adjust, make sure you're scanning on that provisional. And then you could send that into and then make any notes again on the prescription. Now, let's say that on that provision on that prototype, the tissue adaptation was not adequate. It was inadequate, if I read my slide. So then what you would do is with the prototype seated, scan that again 5 millimeters beyond, and then you would remove that and then scan the exposed MUAs. Okay, then you could go ahead and you're going to reseat the provisional they were wearing, or you could go ahead and let the patient wear this provisional, this resin prototype as a test drive. Now, if you know ahead of time you're going to do that, let the laboratory know because they can stain that resin prototype so that now it's not going to be the white is going to be it's not going to be a beautiful. It won't be as nice as your provisional, but at least they can stain the gingival portion of it so it's not this big white piece of white. But the patient can wear it for 1 to 2 weeks to make sure they fine tune the occlusion, make sure they're happy with the phonetics, etc. Or if you're not going to do that, then just reseat the provisional and then send that back to the lab. However, if everything was good and you want to go to the final, you don't need to send anything back to the laboratory. You can just email the lab or call the lab and say, hey, because they have all these files of what you just seeded, you could say, looks great, let's do it. And go ahead and, you know, go to a final. And the curtains pulled back. Now we're ready for delivering the final. And so here we are. Your third appointment could be the second appointment if you elected to do that. Pretty straightforward. You're just going to remove the provisional that they've been wearing, seat the final, again, using that Sheffield test as a way to do that. And very importantly, have time scheduled with your hygienist after this delivery appointment, if not right after, within a few days. The reason for that is very often the final is going to have better adaptation to the tissues because the tissues, you know, have healed and changed maybe a little bit since that provisional was made, and it was easier for them to get a floss threader through, for water picking, for cleaning, etc. So they may need to be retrained on how to do this. So very importantly that you set up time for your hygienist to retrain them about how to for their home care with this. I'd like to say thank you so very much. I hope a little bit tight for our questions, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you all. And I really do appreciate you. Many of you I've met in different situations at maybe live seminars, and I really appreciate your support and for you taking time. And I hope this information I'm sharing with you is helpful.